Greetings, it is I, Countess now Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the history of Magic the Gathering, where I go set by set, release by release, product by product that Wizards of the Coast has given us in the Magic the Gathering franchise, and give you some information about it. Interesting cards, history of the set, world setting, new mechanics, things that you may want to learn about to know about cards you might want to play with, or more interesting aspects of the evolution of Magic the Gathering. Alright, so today I have for you Morningtide. Now Morningtide, of course, was the second in the Shadowmoor mini block, and the last set in the Lorwyn / Shadowmoor mega block. So we are ending the entire 4-set mega block with this second set in the mini block. It was 180 cards, and it was released July 26th, 27th of 2008. Of course, it had the themes of hybrid mana, -1/-1 counters, and untapping, just like Shadowmoor did. But it had the keywords of chroma, persist, retrace, and wither. 2 new keywords added in there. So its symbol for the set, was supposed to represent sort of an opposite to Morningtide. It's thought that it represented perhaps an eclipsed sun, to represent an alteration on that entire morning, the morning sun of Morningtide. Now we have Eveningtide, eclipsed sun. The thing about this set is it also was a very hybrid mana heavy set. But rather than the allied colored manas that we had seen established in Shadowmoor, this was enemy colored combinations. This meant that when it came to the mega cycles which existed throughout this set, these 2 sets, this entire block here, the representation of every combination of 2 colors existed. The 5 combinations of allied colors being from within Shadowmoor, and here being the 5 combinations of enemy colors. Meaning those components that were part of the mega cycles, there was 10 cards in each of them. Now it did add a new type of creature to the mix, Noglin, which we'll show right here. This thing it was also accompanied by a novel of the same name. Now for the storyline itself, it continued talking about the darkness of Shadowmoor, and how now as the gloom settles in and becomes darker, dingier, the world seems to settle into it. New creatures of dark legends, terrible things from the most twisted fairy tales of basically Celtic and similar lore, are coming to the surface. Elves and Kithkin are then withdrawing back into their own cities and civilizations in order to protect themselves, and the darkest creatures of night are therefore taking their place out in the world, taking control. Now, of course, it was sold in 16-card booster packs, 5 pre-constructed decks, a fat pack. Every product, save for the booster packs, had, of course, a Pro Tour card in it. Now, the pre-release card was a foil over Being of Myth with alternate art, and the pre-release was, of course, on July 12th and 13th of 2008. This was chosen because it did represent a bit of the hybrid mana and enemy-colored mana themes that was going on. There was a release card of Figure of Destiny that came out, of course, when the release happened. Now, much like the sets before, there was still a 16th card in these packs, representing a special card that on one side was advertisements, the other would have been 8 rules cards, or there was also 9 tokens, including a goat token for certain cards that would create goat tokens. It is important to note that there were 12 different ads that could appear on the back. As for 2 of the tokens, they were in fact reprints from Shadowmoor, including the Kithkin Soldier. It had the same art and had the same set symbol, but itself was not technically. Yes and no, it was part of this set. That's a great way of saying it. So the set itself continued the -1/-1 counters, persist, wither, and untap symbol themes that we had seen established in the previous set. These continued, just the same as they were, but it did introduce 2 new keywords. Chroma is a keyword that has to deal with the number of colored mana symbols. What do I mean by this? It will tell you to look in a certain area, whether this is hand, graveyard, play, part of your library. It will mention to search that area for at the casting costs of all the permanents, all the spells. It's calling for you to look at a number of cards. Then you look at the converted mana cost of those number of cards. For each colored mana symbol, That means if a card costs you 2 green and 2 colorless, you're just looking at those 2 greens. You count up all those colored mana symbols. 2 here, another 2 there, 1, 3. Add those all together, those numbers. However many you count, that's the numerical value for the chroma spell. There you go. A little complex, but it's not too difficult. You look at the converted mana costs, the colored mana symbols, count them up. There you go. And the spell itself will tell you where you're looking. The chroma ability is all about counting those colored mana symbols on the cards that is telling you to count. Now the other keyword was Retrace, which was in a way a little simpler. Retrace is if this card is in your graveyard, you may discard a land and then pay the mana cost of that spell to cast it from your graveyard. Which means that if I have a Retrace spell in my graveyard, I have a whole bunch of lands, I can discard, pay the cost, play it again. Discard, pay the cost, play it again. As long as I can discard lands, I can pay the mana, I can play the spell again. So this set, of course, had 15 cycles, of which, of course, 7 of these were the 7 mega cycles that have existed throughout Shadowmoor into here. I'm not going to go over full details of it again because I talked about them in Shadowmoor, but just as a refresher, these were the hybrid mana 1-drop creatures, demigods, demigod auras, the hybrid mana filter lands, the hybrid moldal spells, the hybrid 3-drop creatures, and of course, the lieges. Now, as for Eventide itself, it had 8 cycles of its own. These included chroma suballs. These was a cycle of course, rare chroma spells. Simple as that. They're rare spells with chroma. There were enemy color hybrid mana of activated ability creatures. Well, that's a mouthful, but they were monocolored creatures that you could use a hybrid mana of them in one of their enemy colors to activate their abilities. There you go, and had an activated ability. There were the hatchlings. These were 6/6 creatures that came into play with 4 -1/-1 counters. If I would play, because it's a hybrid creature, hybrid mana, 2 colors, if I play a spell of one of their colors, I remove a -1/-1 counter for it. If I played a spell of their other color, remove a -1/-1 counter from it. Both 2 -1/-1 counters. So I play this big creature. It starts out small. The more other spells I play that match its color, the bigger it gets. There were also the hedge mages. These were another set of hybrid creatures, but they represented the new races that were introduced in Shadowmoor, the entire block itself. So when you would play them, you would look to the number of lands you had of types that matched its actual colors. So if I played a blue-green, if I had 2 or more islands, I'd get an activated ability that when it came into play. And if I had 2 or more forests, I would also get another ability when it came into play. And so if I had islands and forests, I'd get both when I threw this creature into play. The mimics were 2/1 shape changers that were indeed hybrid creatures, that when you played a spell that matched one of their 2 colors, they would get some kind of big bonus. Whether they got bigger, something special, they would get it until end of turn. They became powerful. The Retrace spells were basically a cycle of common spells with Retrace. Simple as that. The Skullkin were a cycle of common scarecrows that had activate abilities that would grant a creature of a color a special ability until end of turn. So you could pay some mana on your Skullkin, grant a creature of that said color some kind of ability. The Untappers were common creatures that when you would play a spell that matched a color that mentioned on the card, you could untap it. Traditionally, it was the color of the card itself. So if I played a white spell, I could untap the white Untapper to play it again if I wanted to. Now, there was only one reprint card in this set, Phosphorescent Feast. The important part about this reprint is, this was one of the cards printed in Future Sight. So here we have a card that was shown in Future Sight. It didn't have the chroma word now, but it's the exact same thing, exact same abilities, just reprinted in the actual set it was intended for. Now, of course, there was the 5 pre-constructed decks, as I said. There was a white-red one called Battle Blitz, a green-black one called Death March, a black-white one called Life Train, a blue-red one called Sidestep, and a blue-green one called Superabundance. So let's talk about more cards from this set. There was Bloom Tender. Bloom Tender could tap and add a mana to your mana pool for each color of the permanents you control. So if you had a rainbow of permanents, one of each color, it would tap for 5 mana. It was a great way of getting a lot of mana for something cheap, since you're tapping for nothing to get a bunch of mana, but even then, the more colors you had amongst your permanents, the more color Bloom Tender would give you. Figure of Destiny was, of course, a 1/1. For 1 red/white mana, it would become a 2/2 Kithkin Spirit. Now, if it's a Spirit, you could spend 3 red/white mana to make it a 4/4 Kithkin Spirit Warrior. If it's a Warrior, you can spend 5 red/white to make it a 8/8 Kithkin Spirit Warrior Avatar with flying and first strike. Oh, any of these changes are permanent changes to it. You keep getting Figure of Destiny bigger as you spend more mana for it. So for 1 mana, it's a 1/1, and you can just keep spending and getting it bigger and bigger and bigger until it's a pretty beefy creature. Gilder Baron allows you to play 2 colorless and then a blue and a green, so hybrid mana, and untap it to choose a creature with counters on it. Double that amount of counters that are on that creature. So for each counter on that creature, put another counter of that type on that creature. You double counters on something, whether they're +1/+1, -1/-1, or something else entirely. You can use this to double counters. Really good. Pretty good in some certain situations in Legacy, too. Gleneledron Archmage has you pay 1 blue and sacrificing it to counter-target non-creature spell. It has Persist, meaning you come back, you can counter something else again. Helix Pendle has Shroud, and for X, you can put X tower counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Helix Pinnacle has 100 tower counters on it, you win the game. It's another you win the game scenario, but this one's mana-based, and mana ramp is a little easier than some other situations for these in-win cards. So this one makes it fairly easy to get a big win with, especially if you have really good mana ramp. There's also Nettle Sentinel. Nettle Sentinel does not untap during your untap phase, but if you play a green spell, you may untap Nettle Sentinel. So yes, it doesn't untap, but if you play other green spells, you can untap it and therefore continue to attack with this low casting cost thing. It's pretty good, cheap, quickly. Sanity Grinder. So this is a chroma spell. You reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each blue, you count the number of blue mana symbols amongst all the cards that you've revealed this way. There you go, in the mana costs of them. So look at the mana costs, look at the number of blue mana symbols that are there, count them up. Whatever number that is, target opponent puts that many cards from the top of their library into their graveyard. Okay, so if these 10 cards, I count up 6 blue, they only mill 6 cards. But if I count up, let's say, 20 blue symbols, they get rid of 20 cards from the top of their deck. Then you take these cards that you revealed, you put them in any order, and then put them in the bottom of your library. There you go. And you can put them in any order at the bottom of your library. Stigma Lasher, it has Wither. Whenever it deals damage to a player, they can't gain life for the rest of the game. Pretty mean and pretty nice there, one, for life game prevention. Stillmoon Cavalier. It is a protection from white, protection from black creature. For a white/black hybrid mana, gains flying until end of turn. White/black hybrid mana, first strike until end of turn. 2 white/black hybrid mana, gains +1/+0 until end of turn. So it is like Knights of Past that you could pump up very well, but also the pro white and black together is pretty good. Altar Golem is a trample creature that has power and toughness equal to the number of creatures in play, but it does not untap during its controller's untap phase. Instead, it has an activate ability. You can tap 5 untapped creatures you control to untap it. So you trade other creatures for this big trample one. Archon of Justice. It's a flyer that, if it would be put into the graveyard from play, exile target permanent. Simple as that. If it goes away, you exile something. Ashling the Extinguisher. If she deals combat damage to a player, choose a creature that player controls, they sacrifice it. So you can force sacrifice if you can have Ashling hit someone. Balefire Liege. Other white creatures you control get +1/+1. Other red creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever you play a white spell, you gain 3 life. Whenever you play a red spell, deal 3 damage to target player. Balefire Liege is one of the better lieges, I think. It's my favorite for white and red. Batwing Brome. So, if you paid white in the mana cost of this, prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. If you played black in the mana cost of this, for each player, they lose 1 life for each creature they attacked with this turn. If you pay both, you get both. So if you played a white and a black, not only do you prevent all combat damage from someone attacking you, if they attacked you with a whole bunch of creatures, they lose a whole bunch of life. Catch Raider. At the beginning of your upkeep, you return a permanent you control to its owner's hand. If you want to have come into play effects, this is a nice one to just be able to continue to replay it every turn. Cinder Pyromancer. Tap to deal 1 damage to target player. When you play red spell, you may untap it. This is one of those ones that is one of the untappers I talked about, but this one just does damage to players. So it's pretty nice because it's only tap to do that. You can untap it a lot. Cold Eye Selkie. It has Island Walk. Maybe not the most useful thing, but when deals combat damage to an opponent, you may draw that many cards. So right now it's only a 1/1, but if you get it bigger, you draw more cards. Crackleburr. For a blue and a red and a blue and a red and tapping it, plus tapping 2 untapped red creatures you control, you do 3 damage to target creature or player. Then for a blue and a red and a blue and a red and untapping Crackleburr and untapping 2 blue permanents that you have that were tapped. So tap the red, untap the blue. So if you have more blue reds with Crackleburr, it works the best. But when you untap these 3, you return target creature to its owner's hand. Creekwood Liege, my other favorite liege. Other green creatures you get +1/+1. Other black creatures you have get +1/+1. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a 1/1 black and green worm token into play, which technically is a 3/3 every turn, because the Creekwood Liege gives it +1/+1 because it's green, +1/+1 because it's black. Ooh. Multiple Creekwood Lieges means really big worms very quickly. Very nice. Davinia Pride, a flying lifelink creature. If you have 25 or more life, it gets +4/+4. Becomes an 8/8. So if you gain a bunch of life, if it's a life gaining deck, works pretty well. Dominus of Fealty. It's flying, and at the beginning of your upkeep, gain control of target permanent an opponent controls. Untap it, it gains haste. You can steal a permanent every turn with the Dominus of Fealty. An important thing about this is there's a combo in a much later set with a much later card that allows you that certain cards that you gain control of, you can give to a player, including yourself. So if you gain control of it with something like this, you can then give it to yourself. And while the Dominus of Fealty's ability, when at the end of the turn it would return, it wouldn't trigger anymore. You basically can combo it with something else. With most, until end of turn, stealing things to steal stuff. But there's a good one, because it's permanence. More options. Doomgape. It's a 10/10 trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, you must sacrifice a creature. You gain life equal to its toughness. So though you do have to sacrifice creatures to Doomgape, it is still a 10/10 trample, and you do gain life. Drain the Well. Destroy target land, gain 2 life. So it's an interesting land destruction card. Duskdale Worm. It's a 7/7 trample. Simple as that. But that has become much more of a staple in now, replacing some previous worms, such as things like Scaled Worm and Crawled Worm. This has sort of been the new worm on the block. Endless Horizons. When it comes into play, you may search your library for any number of Plains cards and exile them. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may take a card exiled with Endless Horizons and put it into your hand. Now the thing is, it only says Plains cards, it doesn't say basic lands. So if you have other lands which count as Plains but are something else, exile them, put them into your hand during your upkeep, play them then. That's the important thing, is you get a land each turn with this. Endure. Prevent all damage that be dealt to you and creatures you control this turn. So I make myself and my creatures immune to damage for a turn. Everstrive. It's a flying that gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it. For X and 2 white-black hybrid mana, I can return Everstrive from my graveyard to the battlefield, and then I have to attach an aura of converted mana cost X or less from my hand to it. Attached to it. If I don't have an aura I can attach to it, I have to exile Everstrive. So I can effectively return it to play, put an aura from my hand attached to it. If not, it goes away, and I've just spent mana to make it go away. I should really have my aura in my hand before I even attempt this. Fable of Wolf and Owl. Whenever I play a green spell, I may put a 2/2 wolf token into play. Whenever I play a blue spell, I may put a 1/1 flying bird token into play. If I play one that's both colors, hey, I get both. It's token getting in both green and blue, and it's not bad token getting. There, of course, is Flicker Wisp. It's flying. When it comes into the battlefield, you may remove target permanent from the game, and it will return to play at the end of the turn. So you basically flicker something in and out. If it's something that you control, maybe it's a come and play effect. You remove it from the game when Flicker Wisp comes. At the end of your turn, returns. Maybe it's a big creature that you don't want your opponent blocking with. Play Flicker Wisp, you remove it, attack them, it returns. There's a lot of reasons to use Flicker Wisp. One of the reasons it's good. Gift of the Deity. If the enchanted creature is black, it gets +1/+1 and Death Touch. If it's green, it gets +1/+1 and must be blocked by all creatures able to. So effectively, you give it both Death Touch and Lore. And it gets +2/+2 when you do this. Gift of Deity is pretty nice. Hallowed Burial. Put all creature cards in play on the bottom of their owner's library. You board wipe, but back to everybody's libraries. An interesting version of a board wipe. Hate Flare is a wither creature for 2 colors, a red, and untapping it. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. Player just does damage to. Creature, it does damage to, and withers it, of course. Inundate. Return all non-blue creatures to their owner's hand. It's a blue spell that, in a way, board wipes non-blue creatures. Again, they're just to their owner's hands, but still. Mind Rack Leech. Other red creatures get +1/+1. Other blue creatures get +1/+1. For 4 red/blue hybrid mana, put a red or blue creature from your hand into play. So for 4 mana, I could play anything from my deck. Any creature, at least. Red or blue. Mirror Sheen. For 1 colorless and 2 red/blue hybrid mana, target spell that is targeting me, I may copy it and choose new targets for it. So if an opponent targets me with a spell, I can use Mirror Sheen to copy it and target someone else with it. They also get hit with it. Murkfiend Leech. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. Other green creatures you control get +1/+1. Untap all blue and or green creatures you control at the beginning of each opponent's untap steps. So, every time anybody untaps, all my blue and green creatures untap. You untap, all my things untap. I untap, of course all my stuff untaps. Untap, 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 untap. Necro Skitter. It's a wither creature. When a creature an opponent controls with a -1/-1 counter would be put into the graveyard from play, you may return that creature from the graveyard to play under your control. So if you can put -1/-1 counters on things and kill them, you get them. And it is a wither creature, so I mean, makes it a little easier. And we've talked about some cards from these past sets which work very well with -1/-1 counters and killing off things this way. Nightmare Incursion. Search target player's library for X cards, where X is the number of swamps you control, and remove them from the game. You just have a lot of swamps, and you just then rend cards from their library. Noblest of War, it's flying, and attacking creatures you control get +2/+0. It just makes all your attacking creatures bigger. Knucklelave. When it enters the battlefield, you may take a red sorcery from your graveyard and put it in your hand. When it enters the battlefield, you may take a blue instant from your graveyard and put it into your hand. Red sorcery, blue instant, you get them both back with Knucklelave. Overbeing of Myth. Its power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in your hand, and it has the interesting ability that at the beginning of your draw step, draw a card. So now you are drawing 2 cards, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards you have, so it can get big. Pyrrhic Revival. Each player returns each creature in their graveyard from there to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. So everything that was dead comes back, but with -1/-1 counters on them, which could kill them off again instantaneously if it's a 1/1 creature. So that's a thing. But again, if you had Necro Skitter out and a bunch of 1/1s came back from your opponent's graveyard to play and then all of a sudden died again, well, they did die with a -1/-1 counter on them. Oops. Quillspike. For a green/black, you may remove a -1/-1 counter from a creature you control. Quillspike gets +3/+3 until end of turn. It's a way of removing -1/-1 counters. Again, works with persist stuff very well. Regal Force. When it comes into play, you may draw a card for each creature you control. So, a lot of creatures, a lot of cards. Rekindled Flame. Deal 4 damage to target creature or player. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent has no cards in hand, You may return a rekindled frame from your graveyard to your hand. So effectively, if opponents run out of cards, you get this back to play again. Rise of the Hobgoblins. In addition to its normal mana cost, when you play Rise of the Hobgoblins, you may pay X. You then put X 1/1 red-white goblin soldier tokens into battlefield. So I pay its cost, I get the enchantment, but then I can just pay an X cost to get a whole bunch of tokens. And its ability is for a red-white hybrid mana. Red and white creatures you control get first strike until end of turn. So not only do I get a whole bunch of tokens as part of this, if I want to, I can all give them first strike. Sapling of Colnifer. It's indestructible. When it attacks, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you gain life equal to its toughness, lose life equal to its power, and then put it in your hand. So you might break even, you might lose life, you might gain life, but regardless, if it's a creature, it goes in your hand. Scarecrow. For 1, sacrifice a Scarecrow to draw a card. For 4, tap. Put an artifact creature from your graveyard into play. This is a good one for an artifact deck because it can bring back any artifact creature. Now, yes, it's really made to work with Scarecrows to sacrifice them for cards, but it's a 4-mana artifact creature resurrection, period, that you can reuse. Scarecrow is good in other artifact decks. Snake form. Target creature loses all of its abilities and becomes a 1/1 snake until end of turn. Draw a card. You just make something a snake for a little bit. Spear the Hearth. It's flying. You can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. You get hexproof as a player. Pretty nice. Spitting Image. Put a token of target creature into the battlefield. A token copy of it. So I basically use Spitting Image, choose a creature, I get a copy of that. It has Retrace, meaning I can discard lands, pay its mana cost. Spitting Image again to keep getting copies of my creatures. Springjack Pasture. I can tap it for a colorless. 4 tap, put a goat token into play. 0/1 white goat creature token into play. Then I can tap, sacrifice X goats, add X mana to my mana pool where of any color, where X is of course the number of goats I've sacrificed, and gain X life. So I tap, sacrifice it, get rid of 5 goats, get 5 mana of one color of my choice, any color, but it has to be all the same, and also gain 5 life. Build a bunch of goats up, sacrifice them all for a bunch of stuff. Unmake. Remove target creature from the game. Simple as that. Word of Bones. Each opponent that controls more creatures than you cannot play creatures, and the same goes for artifacts, enchantments, and lands. If an opponent has more of any of these 4 than you, they can't play them. Waves of Aggression. Untap all creatures that attack this turn. After this main phase, there's an additional combat phase, plus an additional main phase after that. So effectively, I get to attack again, and I get another main phase after that. And this has Retrace. And it does, again, untap all the creatures that attacked already this turn. Waves of Aggression. Very nice. Witherbow Elder. It comes into play with a -1/-1 counter on it. I can remove a -1/-1 counter on it for a green to destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's not a bad one, especially if you have other combos that might put -1/-1 counters on things. You could keep putting it on here and keep destroying enchantments of artifacts of your opponents that you don't want them to have. That's why it could be nice. But that's it for today. So we finished the Mega Block, the Mega Cycle. So we finished the Mega Cycle of both Lorwyn and Shadowmoor, finishing up here with Eventide. We went enemy color. We finished up the theme of hybrid mana that we had established in Shadowmoor and completed the set. 10 different hybrids. And once again, I've talked about a lot of cards here because there's a lot of really good cards to talk about, and I hope you've heard a few that you'd be interested in playing with. The Lieges have been always powerful. Plenty of other cards here are great ones to play with. This is a set that has a great legacy of decent cards that aren't like... They don't feel overpowering overall, but they add a lot to plenty of decks. Plenty of combos. These are some of my favorite ones for a set that I unfortunately wasn't collecting at the time it came out. I had to come back into here afterwards. But anyway, I hope you're having a great day, and until the next time, I bid you farewell.